My name is Justin Van Ferrari. Over the next 4 or 5 days, I'm going to be out here in the woods. I'm going to be filming, and it is about 3:30 in the afternoon. I've only got a few hours left of daylight here. I'm in the northern lower peninsula of Michigan. I have no food. It's not the first time I've done this, but I wanted to film it. Let me get going. I'm going to go find a good spot for a shelter. Doesn't have to be anything crazy because it's actually beautiful weather. So yeah, here we go. All right, so I've been hiking for a little bit, and I think I finally found a great spot to set up camp. I'm going to use this as kind of a base camp, and there's a little lake in the background back there. I'm surrounded by pine trees. I love camping in and around pine trees because it provides its own shelter. There's also a lot of dead branches, dry dead branches on the bottom, and it's great for starting fires. And there's some cattail out there. There's also some grass that I can use to get up off the ground tonight. So I'm going to get to work.
I think that shelter is probably one of the biggest considerations to take when venturing out into the wild, because you can survive 3 weeks without food, you can survive 3 days without water, but they say you can only survive 3 hours without appropriate shelter. And it doesn't have to be anything extravagant. It doesn't even necessarily mean you have to have a roof over your head. Maybe it's just getting up off the ground so you don't lose your body heat to conduction, or maybe it's just appropriate clothing. But if you think in terms of those priorities, first shelter, then water, then food, I think you're setting yourself up pretty well.
I'm going to keep building on it as we go. I'm going to get some grass for my bed, get me up off the ground for tonight. It'll be pretty basic. Get a fire going, boil some water, and hunker down for the night. All right, so I got a decent little bit. I'm going to go put this back at the shelter and then go grab some more from the other side. So a little about me. Grew up in Southwest Michigan. Lived here pretty much my entire life. As a kid, my parents were divorced, and so my mom, as a single mom, didn't have a lot of extra money, so we didn't really take a lot of exotic vacations or anything like that as a kid. In fact, we just pretty much went camping. All we could afford. Didn't even realize that was the reason growing up, but my brother and I loved it. And when we were camping, we'd spend as much time as we could outside. When we got home, spend as much time as we could outside. We built forts, all sorts of different things. As I got a little bit older, I went off to a camp, and one of the activities they had for us was ice climbing. And I tried that and absolutely fell in love with it. So I'm an all or nothing kind of guy. I went home, didn't know anything about ice climbing, but built an ice wall in my backyard. It was 16 feet high, and for Christmas that year I asked for some ice climbing gear and had some money saved up and chipped in and got a couple ice axes, some crampons, and built this wall. And I'm living in the city, and my neighbors would pull in, and I'd be up climbing that wall, and all winter long, they never said a word to me. All winter long, they wondered, what in the world is this guy doing? They're trying to figure out what I'm trying to sculpt. Finally, the spring thaw, we're out working in the yard, and they said, so what was that you were trying to sculpt? We couldn't figure it out. And so I laughed. I said, man, I'm ice climbing. I would go up in the upper peninsula near Munising and Marquette area, and that's the closest place, 8 hours away from my house. That's the closest place I could climb. And most of the climbs are pretty remote, and so I would spend a week out in the wilderness in the middle of the winter, climbing, hiking, exploring, finding new waterfall climbs, and that really is what put me over the top. My wife says that she thinks that my brain froze one too many times, because I actually prefer this. I have never once been outside and just gotten to the point where I just need to be back. I've never gotten to that point where I'm sick and tired of the outside. All right, so got some grass, got some cattail I can use to start a fire tonight. Also, I'm going to use the grass for my bedding, but I'm going to grab some pine boughs just to get up off the ground, and then I'll put the grass on top. So it'll be nice, soft. It'll be even more comfortable probably than my bed at home. So I'll have to get some pine boughs. All right, well, there's not much light, but there's a little bit. If it gets darker, it might be interesting filming for you. But got my bed of pine boughs. I'm going to take, I'm really concerned with main part where my sleeping bag, my main body is going to go. That, my friends, is a beautiful bed. Looking forward to sleeping on that tonight. I'd like to get it up off the ground a little bit. I don't know. It might be something I'll play around with throughout the week. But for now, for tonight, I think we're looking good. And get a fire going and we'll be all set.
The key to starting a fire in any condition is all about preparation. You need tinder that's going to catch the spark initially, and you need small, dry wood that's going to act as kindling that'll build the fire up for the larger wood that's going to be your main source of fuel later on. Before I even attempt to light the fire, I make sure I get everything I need and I separate it into piles, and I make sure it's readily accessible. Taking the time to find dry tinder and the driest kindling possible is one of the most important steps. But if it's been raining, if it's wet, then that's easier said than done. Sometimes that takes a lot of work in and of itself. But in my experience, it's almost always possible to find dry wood. And it may take a lot of work. You may have to split the wood. You may have to shave the outer wet layer to get to the inner dry layer. But taking the time to do that will make it possible to start a fire in any condition.
Well, I think probably one of the hardest parts about winter camping is how early it gets dark. There's not a whole lot to do other than sit, enjoy the fire, but I love it when life slows down. I feel like most of the time I'm going 90 miles an hour, running around like a chicken with my head cut off, and I think that's another reason I love the woods. I got fire! All right, yeah. Well, I got the fire going, and this is probably one of my favorite parts of being outside. I got my shelter, got my fire, boiling water. Now it's time to just sit and relax. What a day. I can't believe it's 35 degrees. Sun's down, it got up to 40 degrees. It is unseasonably warm here in February. My wife wanted me to check in, but I have an old phone and the battery dies like as soon as it gets out in the cold weather. And it could be at 100%, and I take it out and within a few minutes it's dead. So I was able to send a text and let her know, hey, I made it out to the woods safe and sound, and I'm gonna have to wait until the rest of the group arrives this weekend to charge my phone. But I'm very comfortable in the Midwest. I've done a lot of hiking, I've done a lot of camping. I know a lot about this area, and I know what foods I can eat and what I can't eat. I live by Google. Google is my other friend. when my wife and I got married, we bought a house that was condemned. We bought it for $12,000, and I just started tearing things apart, putting them back together, and everybody said, "Hey, man, how did you learn how to do that?" I said, well, I just Google or YouTube, and you can find YouTube videos for anything. So I had never rebuilt a house like that. I've had a little construction background, so I know the basics. But we gutted the entire thing. We changed the layout. We moved rooms. We added bathrooms. There was no forced air furnace, and so I would get to a certain point, and I'd Google, how do you do this? And I'd figure it out, and what are the codes, and I got incredible friends that offered some good insight. But that's how I live my life. I just live my life learning. My grandpa, learned that from my grandpa. He would tinker. He'd pull car engines apart, put them back together, and he'd have a bucket full of bolts. And like, I know they went somewhere. I'm sure they're useful, but he'd start it up and drive it off, and he's kind of my hero. So, all right, well, I am just gonna stop rambling. I'm gonna, I don't know, probably doze on and off a little bit, and keep the fire going tonight. I'm pretty excited. I don't think I'll be able to sleep. Usually the first couple nights, it takes me a couple nights to wind down. Your body starts to get exhausted and tired. Man, my mind just races a million miles an hour of all the things I could do, maybe all the things I should be doing instead of doing this. But all right, good night. Oh, good morning. It is day 2, or first full day, however you want to look at it. I'm not not normally a morning person. I usually stay up late. I've always wanted to be a morning person, but whenever I sleep outside, I'm always up as soon as the sun comes up, or as soon as it gets light. And man, I got a great night's sleep last night. This bed is extremely comfortable. This is probably one of the more comfortable ones I've ever made. That grass is amazing on top. So, well, I am going to build, or enclose, I should say, the lower portions of my shelter. The end, I'm going to put a wall up to deflect the fire, almost kind of make a little chimney, keep the smoke out of the tent. The wind's picked up a little bit today, so it's still, I mean, it's not very cold. It's not bad at all. But I probably could get away with just a shelter like this for the rest of the week. But I'm going to go a little extreme. Not much else to do. Later on today, I'll go start scrounging up some food, and that's my plan. Shelter and then food. Alright, well, I've been hard at work today. I was out scrounging around. It's actually starting to rain off and on. It's a rain-sleet mix. But I found a couple birch trees. So I stocked up on some birch bark. Birch bark has oil in it, and it makes phenomenal fire starter. Just got a couple different varieties, but I got enough to last me through the weekend. So here is the end of my shelter now. I've made a little fireplace area, little plow point, and if you look up under here, there's actually some air pockets where the smoke can escape. And I stuffed some debris in here so that the smoke hopefully will be redirected. And here's the outside. It'll block the wind and it'll provide some good warmth. It'll deflect the heat back into the shelter and, in theory, to direct the smoke up out of the shelter. So I had to bring some of my firewood inside. I can spend some time. It looks like it's going to keep raining, so spend some time inside the shelter breaking some of that small stuff up for kindling. And then I've got a few logs that I downed for some of the larger firewood that I'll have to split later on. Here we are. Alright, so I've got my shelter taken care of. I chopped some firewood, and now I am harvesting some pine cambium. A lot of people don't realize, but it's actually edible and it's pretty good for you. The thing you want to be careful of is really should only be used in a survival situation, and you don't want to take the cambium away from the entire trunk of the tree. Small little amount like this from a tree is better. It can recover from that. But the cambium is the layer that provides the nutrients to the tree. And so it'll kill the tree if you go all the way around. So I'm just going to harvest a little bit, and I'm going to head out into the small little lake and harvest some cattail. And there's a larger lake not too far away that either later today or maybe tomorrow I'll do some fishing. So, alrighty. Alright. I've been roasting my rhizome, cattail rhizome, and I'm going to let it roast a little longer. You can actually eat them raw, but I prefer, especially on a cold day, prefer having them warmed up. With the big one, I'm going to boil it, and I'm going to beat it so the starch separates. Then I'm going to dry it out, and I'm going to make a little cracker with it. So this is good. Alright, it is February 7th, and it is raining. It's let up a little bit, but I'm getting my stuff dry. You never know. In Michigan, when I started planting this, I had no idea if it'd be 35 and rainy or if it'd be -10 and blizzard. This has been a very mild winter, and so I have not had a chance in a long time to slow down like this. This is so amazing. I love it. I love just being alone with my thoughts and just relaxing. Took a little afternoon nap when the rain started. Can't tell you the last time I've had an afternoon nap. So I've got over here in my can, or my pot, I've got the rhizomes for the cattail. They are, I crushed them up, and the starch is separating from the rootstock itself, and the starch is actually what crushed down you can make flour. And I'm going to make a little cracker kind of thing, just a little nibble. But I've cooked cattail a lot of different ways. I've roasted them over the fire. In the spring, you can actually take the green stalks and you can just throw those over the coals, and they are amazing. All right, well, not much going on right now. I'm just loving it. So, yeah. All right, well, hey, good morning. Day 3, it's 10:45 a.m. and I am just now getting up and around. Heading out to the larger lake to go fishing. Okay, so I know that you've been waiting with eager expectation for this cattail cracker. All right, I can smell it. It smells like cattail.